Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Dallas Cowboys snuck past the Philadelphia Eagles last year, who were in a tailspin. Can they repeat as NFC East champions? Also, a big-time trade went down in the NFL, but not the one you're thinking of. And Jordan Love will win a Super Bowl sooner rather than later because of one reason.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
As we were going through to do our next division in our Why This Division Winner Might Be a Little Nervous series, I actually forgot it was the Cowboys who won the NFC East. I was going to call Locked On Eagles, but that's not how this ended. And I think that is because we remember how the season ended for the Dallas Cowboys. Marcus Mosher from Locked On Cowboys joins me now. And Marcus, you are the first team on our list. We're not favored to win the division this year. In fact, the Eagles minus 140 favorites, according to our friends over at FanDuel. That seems preposterous to me. Why is it that the Cowboys are looking up in a division they won last year?
First of all, how dare you to think that the Eagles won this division? But no, it's fair. I think a lot of people just assume that it was Philly that won this division because they led the NFC East almost the entire year last year until we got to week 18. And that's when the Cowboys clinched it. Listen, I understand, Peter. I get all the reasons why people are down on this Cowboys team. Mike McCarthy is not the most inspiring coach. They've got contract situations. They didn't make big moves in the offseason. And they had a really ugly loss to your Packers in round one. I forgot about that game, I guess. But on the other side, Philadelphia also had a really bad loss in round one of the playoffs. And they had a 5-game stretch before that where they looked absolutely atrocious. So, listen, I get the Cowboys' downsides, but Philadelphia's got just as many problems as the Cowboys do.
Okay, let's say we get some of these contract issues dealt with if we're the Dallas Cowboys. At the very least, CeeDee Lamb signs. We'll see what happens with Dak Prescott, though. It seems like there's more optimism now on a Dak deal than there was maybe a month, 6 weeks, 2 months ago. Why? Give me why. They're gonna win again.
Well, because if Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are on the field, they're going to have one of the best offenses in the league. We've seen over the last several years, whenever Dak is on the field, this is the number one scoring offense in the NFL. In 2020, before Dak got hurt, number one in scoring offense. In 2021, number one scoring offense. In 2022, when Dak came back from his thumb injury, number one scoring offense. And then again last year, number one scoring offense. Like I hate to repeat myself. They're very, very good on offense, and they've got a young offensive line. I get that. But they also have a defense with a lot of playmakers, including Micah Parsons, 2 all-pro cornerbacks in Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland. They have holes. I don't think they are a Super Bowl caliber team. But can they win 10, 11, 12 games this year? Absolutely. Why not?
And maybe more to the point, why are we assuming that the Eagles are going to be materially better than they were last year? If you look and you say, okay, second half of the season, not predictive of the following season. We have good data on this, but that last month and a half was so bad that if you look at a lot of the underlying metrics, the Eagles were a middling team by the end of last season. Why are we assuming that they're just going to get so much better when they added a defensive coordinator that got ran out of Miami, even though Vic Fangio is a well-respected coach, and Kellen Moore, who you know well, Marcus, the offense in Dallas got better when Mike McCarthy took over play calling duties from Kellen Moore. So why are we assuming Philly is all of a sudden like this juggernaut when we saw last year they were not a very good team?
There's this national media perception that Saquon Barkley is going to do for the Eagles what Christian McCaffrey did for the 49ers. And he's just not that player. I mean, or at least he hasn't been that player over the last couple of years. I think a lot of people believe that you add Saquon Barkley to this offense with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, they're all of a sudden going to solve every problem that arises throughout the season. And I just don't know if that's the case. I mean, you had Jalen Hurts going into a playoff game calling a rival defensive coordinator because he couldn't figure out what was going on with his offense. And now you bring in Kellen Moore.
I love that story.
Yeah, it's incredible. Who I don't know that Jalen Hurts is a great fit with Kellen Moore. But Peter, I got to be honest, my biggest concern isn't even the offense. It's the defense. Last year,
terrible.
They had horrendous linebacker play. I mean, just absolutely awful. So what was their solution this offseason? They signed Devin White, who got benched at the end of the season by Tampa Bay because he was unplayable. And then they signed Zach Bond, who was an edge rusher for the Saints, and now he's their starting middle linebacker this year. That is their solution to covering some of these really good tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. Their secondary is old. They're going to be playing a few rookies, including Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I'm not saying they're going to be bad, but there's a lot of questions with this Eagles team.
Stay up to date on the Dallas Cowboys all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Cowboys on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, there was a pivotal trade in the NFL, but it isn't the one you're thinking of. Before we get to that, J.J. McCarthy will have to wait a full year to get onto an NFL field. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. J.J. McCarthy will miss the entire 2024 season after meniscus surgery, an injury and a surgery they did not know what they'd have to do and how bad it would be until they went under the knife.
So he'll miss, call it 6 months, right? I tweeted 9. That's the absolute maximum recommended recovery time. And for lay people, that's not necessarily for athletes. For the, we'll say, accelerated timelines of the NFL, I don't think that gets me in trouble. But 9 months is the most possible. So that still has him back for OTAs, right? Most of the mechanical work that players do, especially rookies between their, think about Jordan Addison working on releases. You don't really do that in season. You do that after the season and when you kind of have all that off time. So if you put him on a 6-month timeline and he's let's say he's healthy by the time they play the Super Bowl, right? Healthy before the Super Bowl. You're not missing out on much work versus somebody who played the whole season and then, maybe relaxed for a month if their team didn't make the playoffs. And then, after the Super Bowl, they go, okay, let's start doing the my body's ready now. I can do the rehab.
Training camp has not been kind to quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford is the latest to have some sort of injury problem as the Los Angeles Rams announced he left Wednesday's joint practice with the Dallas Cowboys with hamstring tightness. Rams offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur responded to questions by saying, he operates at a world-class level, but we know that every rep is going to be valuable for him, no matter how many plays he's had. Unfortunately, he had some tightness. Stafford was supposed to meet with the media after practice, but that was also canceled. And the Cubs looking to fade out of any contention after getting swept by the Guardians.
Well, the Cubs, I would say, climbed back into the wild card race entering this week, but it was still a big hill to climb, all things considered, and they haven't helped themselves at all this week following what is now a 3-game sweep to the Guardians as the Cubs lost 6-1 on Wednesday and are now 59-63. Cubs didn't really muster much of a fight, neither the second or the third game of this series after roaring back from 8-3 to tie it in the opener. And Sam, we knew that it was going to be an uphill battle, but even despite the White Sox series where they really had to work for two dubs, they had some momentum. And not only do they not salvage the series and maybe just get one coming back to Wrigley, but they lose all 3 games.
I can't tell if the Atlanta Falcons are all in or planning for the future, signing Kirk Cousins, drafting Michael Penix, now trading for Matthew Judon. When do they want to be good exactly? I'm trying to figure it out. Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons. Maybe you can help me figure this all out. A 3rd rounder for Matthew Judon, a no-brainer trade for a team that wants to win right now. Presumably that's what the Falcons want to do, but they are sending some mixed messages this offseason.
Yeah, the Falcons made some interesting choices this offseason. Obviously, getting Kirk Cousins, drafting Michael Penix. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is sort of an all-in move. Michael Penix is more of a long-term move. And then the Falcons really didn't do anything else this offseason, right? Really all that much. And it was like, what's the plan here? And I think with getting Matt Judon, they finally got off their butts and addressed the pass rush that desperately needed help. They lost rookie 3rd-round pick Braylon Trice over the weekend to a torn ACL in the Dolphins game. And even though he was a rookie and probably not going to be a big difference maker, the Falcons were seemingly trusting in their ability to develop those rookies, and that plan went awry. And so if they want to have any chance of having any success while Kirk Cousins is the quarterback, let alone, the future of Michael Penix and whatnot, like they need to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. And so making a move for Matt Judon certainly makes a ton of sense if your plan is to at least try and be decent over these next couple of years.
And the division, not exactly, sparkling in terms of these other teams that we expect to be somewhere between okay and not so great. Like it's hard to project any of these teams, honestly, right now. But Matthew Judon is still a really good football player. How much do you think he impacts this defense under new head coach Raheem Morris?
I think it's huge. It's a huge impact. The Falcons really had nothing. It's like Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, and then really nothing else as far as their pass rush is concerned. And Falcon fans have witnessed far too often in recent years and in the distant past where you would have a team that has a pretty good quarterback like Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins, has some pretty good skill position players like Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and Devontae Freeman and Mohamed Sanu, like Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. And then it would completely get torpedoed because their defense couldn't stop anybody. They could score a lot of points, but they couldn't stop anybody else from scoring. And a lot of that had to do with the Falcons basically having the worst pass rush in the NFL for, like 20 years is basically at this point in time. So getting a player like Matt Judon, whether you can criticize it, did they give up too much for a 32-year-old player that's towards the end of his time? That's probably the reason why the Patriots weren't that interested in extending him. But for the Falcons, beggars cannot be choosers. They just need anybody competent out there that can get pressure on the quarterback so that they can have a real chance, not just a pretend chance of winning the division.
Yeah, and when this trade likely becomes official, August 15th, that's Matthew Judon's 33rd birthday. So he's going into his year 33 season here for the Falcons. Okay, so it has a huge impact. We agree. From 0 to actually something is a pretty big difference, right? So how does it change the way that you view the Falcons, if at all, whether we're talking about in the division, in the NFC hierarchy, like broaden the impact to me from a more macro 30,000 foot viewpoint on the Falcons?
Well, I think it certainly, obviously the first step for the Falcons is that they want to win the division and make the playoffs. And if they can achieve that, I think this trade definitely helps them do that. And then assuming that they can do that for the first time in 7 years, because we've been sitting here for 6 years saying, hey, this is their year. They're getting back to the playoffs. And then they inevitably wind up like 7-10 or something. But if they can get past that very, very hard hurdle that they have not been able to get past the last 6 years, then I think this trade does give them a chance to contend in the NFC, right? They're not going to be a team that's at the top of the conference. You got San Francisco, you got whoever probably wins the East, you got a team that pretty well, which is the Chicago. No, I'm kidding. The Green Bay Packers. It's not going to make them leapfrog those teams, but it is going to give them a chance that when they get if they get, let me rephrase, if they get to the playoffs in January, you're going to have to be able to put pressure on these quarterbacks that are pretty good in the NFC. Obviously, the AFC probably has the best quarterbacks in the league, but the NFC has some very good guys. And if you want to have any chance of stopping them, you need to be able to put pressure. And at least Matthew Judon gives you a puncher's chance of being able to do that and maybe making some noise in January.
Stay up to date on the Atlanta Falcons all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Falcons on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Jordan Love has the perfect support system. The question now isn't if Jordan Love is good. The question is, can Jordan Love live up to his predecessors? Following Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre will not be easy. As Locked On NFL host Tyler Rowland and Alex Clancy discuss, he is in a perfect position to succeed.
I trust the infrastructure in Green Bay. Like, they've just proven over and over that they get it. They're cutting edge. We were just using them as an example of, hey, look at the new wave in the NFL. You don't want to pay a big wide receiver anymore. They're too expensive. And there are so many good receivers like this. You know, the supply and the demand are off. It doesn't make sense. There's a market inefficiency. And they were one of the first people to the table to recognize it. Like, I just think that it reminds me, and we talked about this right before we went on air here. It reminds me of when Aaron Rodgers won Super Bowls. Look, Donald Driver and Greg Jennings and Jordy Nelson, like, none of these dudes were like the best of the best in their draft class, the most exciting name. Like, that's a combination of mid-round picks. And then you look at the Packers wide receivers right now. You got Christian Watson, who's the second rounder, but he may be the fourth best wide receiver when you have Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs, who I talked to Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, does a great job there, Locked On Sports Today, all of that. I'm like, why does no one talk about Romeo Doubs? He's like the fourth most exciting name, but he might be the best wide receiver in the group. Like, they just have so many good, you mentioned Luke Musgrave. They got a Tucker Kraft there. Like, right. They just have such a good system. I think Matt LaFleur is a very, very good coach. Like, I really do believe that he is a very good coach. I believe he's still up there in win percentage in NFL history. He's like one of the best head coaches in win percentage. They're going to consistently be good. And we've seen in the NFL, going back to like the Eli Manning situation, if you're good and you get in the tournament, if you get hot, anything can happen in the NFL. It's single elimination. Anything can happen. The best team doesn't always win in football. It's not 7-game series like the NBA where you got to prove it over and over. Like, one game, anything can happen. And in those circumstances, I just believe Green Bay is going to get themselves into the tournament enough times with Jordan Love, and they're going to draft and be smart as a franchise that eventually they're going to break through. Now, getting 2 is really where you stamp it and you prove it. I don't know if he can do that, but I certainly do believe that Jordan Love can get a Super Bowl in Green Bay.
Yeah, the NFC North is ever changing. Now you're going to beat Minnesota twice in 2024. So that's 2 wins. Yes. That is 2/9 of what it takes to get to the playoffs. Yep. Immediately. Like, there's, barring any sort of unforeseen things, like, it's Jordan Love threw one terrible pass in his first playoff in his first playoff loss in San Francisco last year.
I just want to say, I did not set this up, not to get the compliment. I didn't put it in the rundown, but they're right. And this is something that we have talked on Locked On Packers about a lot this offseason. The model that the Packers have used is changing. And they did it with Aaron Rodgers later in his career with Davante Adams. They didn't take Davante Adams thinking he would become the best receiver in the league, which he eventually did. Think of the 2014 Green Bay Packers. Probably the best team that they had that didn't win a Super Bowl. It was Jordy Nelson, who was one of the 8 to 10 best receivers in the league, but not one of the 2 or 3 best. Randall Cobb, who might have been the best slot receiver in the league, but was probably somewhere between the 14th and 20th best receiver in the league. And then Davante Adams, who was a rookie. That was the depth that they had. Really, really good players. And then Eddie Lacy in the backfield. Alex's point about, and Ty talking about 2010, when it's Donald Driver, it's Greg Jennings, it's James Jones, it's an ascendant Jordy Nelson. We didn't even know in 2010, watching that team, what Jordy Nelson would be. It wasn't until the end of the 2010 season that he even looked like a meaningful NFL player? Is there one of these players that could pop? Matt LaFleur said it makes him vomit to hear all this talk about the number one receiver stuff. The Packers' infrastructure is different than anything any team in the league is currently doing. They had the youngest group of pass catchers ever last year. And they became the youngest playoff team to win in the postseason. They bet on their ability to draft and scout players. And they didn't do the thing that most teams do where they go in and they say, we need to hire a veteran. We need to sign somebody just to sign them, just to say we have a veteran receiver. No, everyone's going to grow together. And now this is a team where the vibes are immaculate. They have one of the deepest rosters in the NFL, and they have still a bunch of young players who can only get better. Right now, the Packers and the Texans are the envy of the rest of the NFL. And finally, Scottie Scheffler might be the best player in the world when it comes to golf, but he doesn't like the FedEx Cup. The PGA Tour's 3-event playoff starts Thursday at the FedEx St. Jude Championship. At a news conference before the tournament on Wednesday, Scheffler said, "You can't call it a season-long race and have it come down to one tournament." Easy for him to say, considering he's pretty much won everything else but the FedEx Cup. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, did your favorite team win its division last year? There's a good chance they won't do it again this year, unless you're a fan of the Chiefs. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.